So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So today we continue with our sequence of 5 essential leadership topics for the business new era. So I'm Paul Northey, and my colleague is Peter Coxon. So we're going to discuss today the using your head, which is the second topic in the series of 5. So maybe Peter, maybe you could give an overview of what you mean by using your head in a business context.
Yes, well, we'll pick up from the previous podcast of looking at the big picture and forward thinking, and just recognizing we need to stop and think, how do we best communicate with our colleagues, the rest of the team, the rest of the organization, and how do we communicate with regard to this big picture? So it's vital that we get this right, and it's a more difficult time to communicate effectively. There's a lot of what's called hybrid leadership around now, where we're talking with people in the room, and we're talking with other people in the building, and then we're talking with people who are working from home with all the distractions that they might have as well, so working remotely. So it's more critical than ever that we make sure our communications are fit for purpose. And there's plenty of organizations where it's not brilliant at the best of times. And John Covey refers to one of the main reasons why change initiatives fail to deliver on their promises. It's a failure, he says, by a factor of 10-fold or 100-fold, a failure to communicate effectively. So we'll have a chance to look at what might that need to be in this new era.
Yep.
So I start off immediately with one of my questions, really, to the audience. So how well do you communicate with your employees? Whether you've got a hybrid or whether it's completely remote or you've got everyone in, there are challenges in getting this right. Certainly when you're working remotely, Zoom type meetings can work really well and efficiently for some people. They're quite enjoying it. And whilst others can get disengaged, I've caught myself doing that myself at times. Distractions can rise over time. And some people are referring to, what's the phrase, being zoomed out these days. I've started actually with clients wherever I can, when it's one-to-one, of offering a walk and talk session from time to time.
Yeah.
Particularly when we're thinking about the big picture, it's good to get outdoors in the open air, somewhere where you've got a view up on a hill, somewhere on the coast.
Perfect.
Somewhere where you can think big.
Yeah. So I guess one of the critical aspects of zooming out is a lack of variety of methods. Some people might fall into a deep trench of Zoom calls, which can get very repetitive and lack direction, involvement, maybe the communication, because you're not in the physical space, is not so good. So I think it's important for leaders to consider different people, maybe different mechanisms appeal, and that's something you have to work out. But in general, a mixture of Zoom calls, conference calls, one-to-one calls, I think helps keep the relationship fresh, and I think stops this kind of fatigue of video calling. Yeah.
I think that's right. So more than ever, there are questions about how we manage these meetings that you might wish to revisit. So what is the purpose of the different agenda items that you have? That's a simple question to ask, but quite hard sometimes to answer. Why you got this agenda item on the list? What are you trying to get out of it? What's your objective? What response, therefore, do you need from your participants? And depending on the answer to those two questions, how many people should you invite for these different kinds of meetings? So if, for instance, it's an agenda item is just for information giving, then you can address the whole organization. You can address the whole country. The Queen can speak to millions at Christmas. You might just ask for a few questions just for clarification, so that people get the message. But actually, if you're looking for a discussion, then an absolute maximum of 12 people. and preferably smaller.
Yeah.
And in a group of 12, you'll expect to get good contributions from 3 to 4, moderate contributions from 3 to 4, and little or nothing from the other 3 to 4. So don't set yourself up to make it difficult for people to be engaged.
I often attend Zoom calls, and some of the more successful sessions have an independent moderator who's watching for questions coming in on the Zoom system, and ultimately interrupting the speaker and fundamentally interacting with the call. Because if you're speaking, it's very difficult to speak, catch everyone's attention, and keep an eye on questions that are coming through on the sideband. Yeah.
So you're slightly ahead of me on this in a way,
okay,
but we'll absolutely come to this.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me just think about the other kind of purposes of agenda items. So if, for instance, you need to make some decisions, well, you can make decisions amongst a large group of people if you just want to use a voting system. But if you want discussion first and a sharing of views, then again, that's a smaller group. If you want to solve a problem, then a group of 6 is more than enough. Then you can really get into the nitty-gritty of things. And of course, if it's a problem which is an interpersonal problem, there's a conflict of views between people about what we should do, then if you want to resolve those conflicts, then actually having 2 or 3 maximum representatives who can represent the different views and work through the appropriate process. So there are processes for all of this, but you need to remind yourself what's the purpose, and therefore what process should I use. And that's where it's really useful if you can have a process leader. So rather than the kind of classic chairperson who might be all the more directive, or the boss just chooses to run the meeting, where people are likely to just agree with the boss if we're not careful. Better to have someone manage the process, but for each particular agenda item, and make sure that you give everyone an opportunity to speak. Now, in some groups where we've got a few that aren't contributing, will you go for the breakout rooms and say, okay, we're going to have 5 minutes or 10 minutes into your breakout groups to discuss this, and then could someone represent that small group? That way you'll get everyone contributing and engaging in it. But you need someone to manage the technical side of that process as well, to press the right buttons to take you into your breakout rooms as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good process. I've seen it work very well, especially in that kind of group situation where an independent moderator is incredibly useful to let's say bring in those additional topic points or question points.
Absolutely. So it's good to manage people's expectations about what participation you're hoping for, what process you're going to use. That takes a little bit of training up to start with, but once people have got the hang of it, meetings can be much more efficient, much more engaging, and people get much more out of it. So I think what's critical is for you to consider what might work best for your situation, for any particular item, for the people you want to talk with, and then review it on a regular basis and seek some feedback from people specifically with ideas for improvement from your colleagues. So invite that at the end of the meeting, a quick 2-minute round or something, suggestions for improvement.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I think ultimately not everyone responds to the same kind of communication process, and ultimately you have to get that variety in, and you have to somehow customize your leadership communication to the individual and the group. Clearly to the group, your options are limited, but communicating to the individual, it should be based on what you perceive and what feedback you get is going to get you the optimum results, right? Some people don't like, there are also different people who don't like to be, let's say, in so much contact. They like to be left alone to execute a task. Or some people like to be communicated with, every hour, every 2 hours or something, just to say hi, how are you? Human nature is very varied, and solutions are very varied as a consequence.
Yes, and we'll pick up on session before
Okay.
this issue of the emotional connection, if you
Okay,
like, the
great.
one-to-one,
Yeah.
the more personal interaction. But
Okay.
for now, we've been looking at how we communicate when we're referring to the big picture and the way forward.
Yeah.
So we've reviewed what we need to do in the light of the changing circumstances.
Yeah.
Once you've got agreement in principle as to the way we're going forward, then you need to determine some new goals. Well, we all know about setting goals. What I like to do with my clients is to invite them to say, first of all, so what are your secure goals? What can you aim to achieve, let's say this year, that you're 90% confident of achieving in the new circumstances? What are you still nevertheless thinking, yeah, we can absolutely do that, no problem, barring, some other massive typhoon that blows the building over metaphorically, then we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
And I then ask people, and again, they're quite familiar, to say, so what would be a realistic stretch goal that we can set ourselves? I don't like the idea of imposing it on other people. I like the idea of people working out for themselves. So what could we do if we really got ourselves organized, if we were really good, if we were the best that
Yeah.
we can do?
Well, I think we've seen some extraordinary efforts. A great example is the vaccine delivery, right, where maybe a 7-year process has been condensed into one. Yeah.
Well, you're ahead of me again, Paul, as ever. I'm playing catch up here. So what I'm saying is, having a realistic stretch, you might say, well, actually, let's say we're 60-odd% confident of getting that. It's not for certain. There's all sorts of things that could stop us, but we've got a reasonably decent chance if we have a good run up at it. And we get ourselves really organized.
Yeah.
And then we come to, I think, in a sense, what you were referring to, which I call the barrier breaking goals.
Okay.
So I'd say, so if there was nothing to stop you, if you were the best you could ever be, individually and collectively, if you were helicoptered in to this organization because you were the best in the world to do what you've got to do, and nothing could stop you, you were an immovable force. What could you achieve this year? If you could break down all the typical barriers that you're likely to face, what could you achieve? And that's, I think, more like where they've somehow condensed a 10-year process into less than one.
Yes, a great example of ultimately what can be achieved. So I think that was a great session, Peter, and we look forward to the next session, which will be session 3.
Yes, we're going to look at, so once we've set those barrier breaking goals, let's have a jolly good look at, so what are these barriers? What are the things that could still stop you from achieving your vision, stop you from achieving these big, hairy, audacious goals that you're setting yourself?
Great.
We'll have a good look at that next time.
Great. I look forward to talking with you and listening to your insights. So thank you again, Peter.
Speak to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.